Welcome to this chilling journey into the unknown. Every corner of our world hides shadows, and sometimes these shadows roam right next door. Today we will dive into the creepy stories about neighbors who are not connected by worldly ties. Close the doors, dim the lights, and get ready to read a series of scary stories that will help you never look at your neighbors the same way again. Start. I've always thought there was something off about the new neighbors, but in our sleepy little suburb, curiosity doesn't get you far. After all, who cares if the Joneses preferred to garden under the veil of night? The whispers about their nocturnal activities were just idle chatter, until I noticed the eerie glow from their yard as I walked my dog late one evening. The plants shimmered with a ghostly radiance, casting long, sinuous shadows across the neatly mowed grass. They weren't like any species I'd ever seen. Their stems twisted upwards like tendrils reaching out to the heavens, and their leaves flickered as if lit by an internal flame. I should have walked away then, mind my own business as any sane person would. But curiosity is a powerful force, and the uncanny beauty of those glowing plants drew me closer. That's when I saw Mr. Jones, or rather, the husk of the man who used to be Mr. Jones. He was tending to the plants, moving sluggishly, his skin pale and translucent, veins dark and prominent, as if his life force was being drained away into the soil he so lovingly cultivated. I stumbled back home, the image of Mr. Jones's gaunt face haunting my dreams. But the real nightmare began the next morning. I woke up feeling drained, my limbs heavy, my thoughts foggy. I dragged myself to the window, my breath catching in my throat, as I saw the plants had doubled in size, their glow brighter and more menacing, and they were closer to my property. The boundary between our yards blurred under their invasive spread. Over the next few days, I watched helplessly as my vitality ebbed away. The plants continued their relentless encroachment, and anyone who ventured too close seemed to fall under their spell. Neighbors began to garden at odd hours, tending to the alien flora with a zeal that was unsettling. Each day, they looked more emaciated, more ghost-like. Desperation clawed at my mind. I had to do something before it was too late. Late one night, armed with nothing but garden shears and a shaky resolve, I crept across to the Joneses' yard. The plants recoiled as I approached, their leaves rustling in what sounded like whispers. Every snip of the shears was met with a chorus of hisses and groans, not from the plants, but from the neighbors who emerged, surrounding me with hollow eyes and gaunt faces. "Stop!" Mrs. Jones's voice was a raspy whisper, her hand on my arm, icy cold. "They're healing our planet. They're taking what they need to survive, just as we take from the earth. It's a fair trade." I shook her off, my heart pounding as I realized the grim truth. These plants weren't just sapping our life force. They were binding us, making us dependent on their alien cycle of growth. It was symbiosis, but one that favored only the invaders. With a surge of adrenaline, I chopped more fiercely, determined to free us from their grip. The air filled with an ethereal wail as the main stem fell, its luminescence flickering out like a dying star. Dawn was breaking as I finally stopped, sweat and tears mingling on my face. The neighbors, released from their trance, staggered back to their homes, their expressions a mix of relief and horror. The plants withered, their threat neutralized, but at what cost? The yard was a battlefield, and we were survivors with no victory to celebrate. From that day on, we avoided the night, our community bound by a wary peace forged in the eerie glow of alien plants. We never spoke of the harvest again, but the scars remained, a constant reminder of the night when the harvesters came. and almost claimed us all. In the sleepy hamlet of Crow's Hollow, where fog clings to the earth like a shroud, there stands an ancient well, long sealed and shunned, in the overgrown yard of my eccentric neighbor, Mr. Wren. Legend whispered it was cursed, a mouth to the underworld, speaking only to those who dared listen. I, too, dismissed these tales as mere superstition, until last autumn's eve. It began with a peculiar visit from Mr. Wren, a gaunt figure with eyes like hollow pits. "It's your turn," he rasped, handing me an old rusted key. Listen to the well and heed its words. Puzzled and intrigued, I accepted the key, the cold metal heavy in my palm. As night enveloped the town, curiosity overcame my fear. I ventured to the well, its stones cold and slick with moss. The ancient wood cover creaked as I unlocked it, a musty, damp air rising to greet me. I leaned over the edge, my ears straining in the silence. Then, a whisper, soft as the brush of moth wings. "Knowledge for a price," it sighed, its voice a melodic lure. Each word was a drop of nectar, sweet yet poisoned with dread. "What do you seek?" "Truth," I whispered back, my voice trembling. The well hummed, pleased. "One secret for one sacrifice. Something cherished must be given." I thought of my mother's locket, a trinket I always wore, hidden under my shirt. Heart pounding, I removed the necklace and dropped it into the dark depths. A splash echoed, swallowed by an approving murmur from below. "Look to the place where roots entwine with bones," the well instructed. Its cryptic message gnawed at my mind as I returned home, restless and unnerved. By morning's light, I was drawn to the old oak in the churchyard, its roots thick and gnarled, twisting through the earth like serpents. There, partially uncovered by the wind-swept soil, lay a human skull, its hollow eyes staring up at me. My heart froze. Whispers curled around me, not from the well, but from the grave itself. "Murder," they hissed. "Reveal the truth." Armed with this macabre discovery, I approached the constable. Investigations unearthed the buried secrets of Crow's Hollow. My own ancestor, the founder, had been a murderer, his victims buried anonymously beneath the town's sacred heart. The revelation tore through the town like a storm. I was shunned, the sins of the past clinging to me like a curse, and yet the whispers did not cease. Each night, they beckoned, promising more, always more. For another sacrifice, torn between dread and desire, I found myself at the well once more. "What now?" I asked, the darkness yawning below. "Freedom," it breathed, a chilling smile in its tone. "Freedom from the whispers, from the curse. But it requires a final offering, your very essence." I stared into the void, the choice gnawing at my soul. Could I endure this spectral torment to preserve my life? Or was oblivion a sweeter release from the agony of knowledge? As the wind howled, echoing the well's seductive promise, I made my decision. Closing the cover, I turned the key, locking away the whispers forever, or so I hoped. I threw the key into the river, letting the current sweep away my chance of ever listening again. Now, I live in the silence, the whispers of the well a haunting memory. Yet sometimes, in the dead of night, I wonder what truths still lie hidden, calling softly from the dark, waiting for another to listen. I had never liked the quiet. Silence was a void waiting to be filled by whispers and shadows. So when my neighbor, Mrs. Harper, announced a community yard sale to clear her late husband's collection from their sprawling Victorian mansion, it seemed like a perfect distraction. I walked under the gray autumn sky towards the rows of tables lined with trinkets and dusty antiques. Each item, Mrs. Harper explained with a hollow smile, held a story from her extensive travels with Mr. Harper. I was drawn to a delicate, hand-carved music box. It seemed harmless, quaint even, with its intricate designs whispering of far-off lands. The box was surprisingly heavy in my hands. Mrs. Harper leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Be careful with that one, dear. It plays more than just music." Laughing off her words as a quirk of an old widow, I paid her the asking price and took my prize home. That night, I wound up the music box, and as its haunting melody filled my living room, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. I shrugged it off as a draft, but then the photographs on the mantel began to tremble, and a voice, barely a whisper, called out my name. I froze, listening as it grew louder, more desperate. It wasn't just calling me, it was pleading. The music stopped, and the room fell into oppressive silence. Sleep eluded me that night, and when dawn broke, I decided to research the music box. My neighbor had mentioned Mr. Harper had acquired it in Eastern Europe, from a market shadowed by old superstitions. As days blurred into nights, the haunting grew worse. Shadows darted in the corners of my vision, and the plaintive melody from the box seeped through the walls at all hours. Desperate, I returned to Mrs. Harper, who regarded me with a knowing look. "You've heard them, haven't you?" she asked. The voices of the past trapped within each item sold. Each carries a curse, a piece of its history, never meant to be forgotten. I pleaded with her to take it back, but she refused. The only way to end the curse is to return it to where it belongs. You must take it back, to the heart of the Carpathians, where it was made. With no other options, I embarked on a desperate journey across the world. The music box seemed to sense its nearing fate, the haunting intensifying as we neared our destination. The local villagers spoke of a cursed object, stolen from a grave, meant to seal away spirits that could not find rest. At the summit of an ancient burial mound, under the watch of stoic mountains, I buried the music box. As the soil covered its surface, the melody played one last time, fading into a sigh of relief that swept through the valley. Returning home, the silence greeted me like an old friend. Mrs. Harper's house was empty, a for sale sign swaying in the breeze. It seemed she too had left, perhaps her own curse lifted with the return of each haunted object. I realized then that some things are better left untouched, their stories too heavy for the living to bear. Now, I embrace the silence, wary of the whispers that might fill it.